Hey everybody, so I'm here today with Mr. Ben and Mr. Jonathan, and they're going to help me hash through the 5w4 versus 5w6 and which I relate more to. So I wanted to jump right in with, whenever I look this up, trying to differentiate between the two, the conversation almost always goes to, well, you just need to look at the 4 profile versus the 6 profile. And I'm like, well, okay, well, I mean, that doesn't really help me. So I don't know why I just lost my audio.
Looking.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Ben muted himself.
Yeah. I get the urge every now and then.
So, I mean, is that the best way to go about it? Just look at the 4 versus the 6 profile, see which one you relate more to, and be like, whichever one I relate more to, slap that on as the wing. Or
I'd like to make a point first, and that is you relate to self-preservation, and there is some overlap between self-preservation and 6. And so when you're deciding between 4-wing and 6-wing, you might be categorizing some self-preservation stuff as E6 stuff. So maybe Jonathan, you could, if you could distinguish between those two, because it's all about separating factors out. Once we've separated out the 6 from the self-pres, then I think we can more accurately compare the E4 to the E6 when we know what is E6 and what is self-pres.
Well, 6 is a bit self-pres, but it's also a bit social. So I don't think that's there's elements to it. Like the social instinct is associated with the head center in general. So because there's sort of an analysis aspect to it. Self-pres is associated with the gut center, and the sexual is associated with the heart center. That's how it's goes out. So that's another issue, really. As far as what Hailey was saying, that is one way to do it. Like, you can look at both and see what you relate to more. If you are 5, you should be relating to both a bit anyway. But there are other methods. So one way to think of it is that the 5-wing, usually with all the types in the wings, one type will be a bit more, one wing will be a bit more introverted and one will be a bit more extroverted, for example. So in this case, the 5-wing4 is more of an introvert, whereas the 5-wing6 is a bit more of an extrovert, because the 6 will want the security of others and outside external factors and outside systems and people to support it. Whereas the 4, with the 5 and the 4, you've got 2 withdrawn types coming together. So, I mean, you've said that, your husband always thought that he hated people, and he says you hate people even more, or something along those lines.
yeah,
So that could be it.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, because I mean, I would consider him very introverted, like myself, like compared to others, that is. But yeah, comparing the two of us, I reach my down point so much faster. I mean, 20 minutes, we step out the door, I'm like, I just want to go home. I don't want to be here. I don't like, it's bad. And he's like, dude, I thought I was bad. So, but yeah, I definitely find myself more introverted, just wanting to be alone. I just don't have a need for people.
And how is he with socializing with others, especially compared to you?
He is still pretty bad, but he has more of a tolerance for it than I do. But still not anywhere near the normal socializing level.
What about friendships?
Like me, almost none.
So, how would you describe him being better than you?
Well, for example, when we go out, when we go to the grocery store, or when we have to step out, he doesn't seem to mind being out like I will. Maybe if we're out for 6 hours, he'll be like, yeah, okay, I'm getting there. But with me, it comes very quickly. So,
okay.
Like, he has more of a tolerance of being out and around people. And I I mean, I think part of it for me is being around people, but part of it is like, I feel like I'm just wasting time. Like, I don't want to be here. I want to go home and do my stuff, my projects. I just want to go be in my mind, and I can't do that. Go ahead.
There's a bit of an interruption here, which I apologize for. But do you think that the way people interact with your husband versus the way they interact with you is different, and that might be another source of why it's draining?
What do you mean?
Maybe people interacting with you with certain preconceptions or with certain ulterior motives, and you might find that draining. Like, like, for instance, men who may be hitting on you, or women who are witchy towards you.
Maybe a little bit of that, but I don't, unless they come up and talk to me and I'm forced to stare them in the face, I won't notice a lot of it because I'm not scanning around looking at everyone's behavior. Are they looking at me? I'm so in my mind. I don't see a lot of it. And also I can project a really kind of cold, stoic, like intense. I don't necessarily mean to be mean, but I think a lot of guys too can be intimidated by that. So I'm okay. When you ask me like, how is it different when people interact with you versus your husband? I have to think about, like, for example, when our neighbors came to our door and knocked on the door saying, "Hey, welcome to the building." I mean, they didn't know him any more than they knew me. And I mean, I guess there aren't very many instances where I can think of right off the bat. But yeah, I think the main thing with that would be like, he seems to have more of a tolerance to be around people and talk to people than I do. I don't know.
Do you think, because he works in finance, do you think he's, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, it's fine.
You maybe could say with him that I see more of a 3 in him. And
yeah, I do too.
And the 3 is going to be a bit more about people.
Right.
It's just because of the nature of it. It's almost because it's like, because a part of it is success in the eyes of other people and impressing other people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's probably going to be a bit more, and also he's probably, and given the area that he's in, stereotypically that's more ENTJ-ish. So he might be a little bit closer towards ENTJ.
Well, again, if comparing him and I is different than like comparing everyone else with the two of us, because he is very low energy like I am. In his mind, it's just that extreme intolerance for being, it's not just being around people, it's just being out of my house.
Right.
That is draining for me. He doesn't enjoy it, but he, again, like, that's the only way I can put it. He has more of a tolerance for it, and he reaches his done point like a lot. Like, it takes some time for him.
So maybe a way to drill down on this is to think about, so when does he interact with people, and when do you interact with people, and does he get benefit out of particular contacts with people, maybe in sort of networking, business related contacts?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, in terms of business for him, but that's about the extent of it. His, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'll just say for him, 513.
Okay, so another difference, maybe one of the real differences in more the core fears of each subtype and wing, or maybe you want to call it. So the 5w4, the fear is more nihilism. There's a more feeling of they're more concerned with the meaning and deeper purposes of life from an intellectual perspective, whereas the 5-6 is a bit more about security and survival. And when they're unhealthy, they're become a bit more paranoid. That's the other way to look at it, because when you're drawing down those differences, it's really where the core fears are coming from. So how would
What would the unhealthier 4 look like?
well, I'm talking about the 5 with the 4 wing here rather than
Oh, yes, okay.
I have something I might show, and in the meantime, I'll be quiet. But I have some levels of the 4 and 5 I can show.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I see it, I'll just put it on the screen. Yeah, I'm really not sure how to answer that.
well, how do you relate to nihilism? Have you ever thought about that kind of thing?
Well, with the 4, like with it being the wing anyway, I definitely feel there's this element, but that's just with me being a healthier type. That's not what I do when I'm stressed necessarily. And I'm actually trying to put myself, like, I'm trying to remember when I actually have been stressed and why. But usually when I'm stressed, it's because there's a problem that I need to solve. And when that happens, I'm a problem solver. Like, I just want to solve the problem. Like, and so I think when I get, like, point being, when I'm stressed out, I don't spend a lot of time fixating on this sucks, depressed, like stress. I'm just like, problem solve, like problem, fix the problem.
Mm.
But when I'm in a healthy state, alone in my mind, I find that, yeah, these darker themes are something that I enjoy. It almost drives me, like I mean, that sounds kind of stupid, I guess, but and also with my husband, we believe, being 5-6, I can definitely see that I have more of the 4 element, the darker elements, the more mystical side. But again, that's the healthier side. That's not the stressed. Oh,
Well,
I'm sorry, Ben. I didn't see that.
yeah.
Oh, I'll just say which book this comes from. This comes from the book by Risa and Hudson, Wisdom of the Enneagram. And
Okay.
there are these for all 9 types. It's a sort of a version that's easier to digest than a similar table in their previous book, which was sort of more in diagrammatic form, and it required reading the whole chapter in order to understand the table properly. So yeah, if people want this information, they can see it for all 9 types in the Wisdom of the Enneagram. So that's to balance the fact I'm showing something from their book.
I will say, though, I mean, of course, this is the healthy, that I always have had this desire to understand myself and know myself, and who I am, like my mental processes, what drives me, like why I want to know why. With my husband, he doesn't really care that much. Like he finds some of it interesting, but he doesn't have that yearn to sit on a chat discussing it for an hour like I do. So yeah, and I've come to find that's a very 4 thing.
Yeah.
Basic desire to find themselves and their significance, also achieve unless their problems.
Also,
Yes.
I'll say, Hailey, because of the types that tend to have the 4 fixation, you're looking at NFs, especially introverted NFs, and ISFP. And all of those are strong with FI, and even NFJs. NFJs, like, even if they've not got a 4 in the tri-type, they're still going to have those 4 themes because they're idealists, and identity and recognition, they're very important to idealists. And so that's just that thing of the people that tend to have the 4 fixation tend to be particularly Jungian types. And it's pretty much NF or ISFP. So Is that fair, Jonathan?
You know, four people tend to lead with four tend to be those.
Yeah.
So so basically the 5-4 stereotypical is more the sort of any 5 would want to be an expert in whatever field it is. The 5-4 would be more drawn to things like being an expert scholar, being an expert in things like history or philosophy or existential subjects, art perhaps as well, more artistic things. Whereas the 5-6 stereotypical is more science, physical science, hard sciences, and business and that kind of thing, and maybe politics. And even if the 5-6 does get into arts, it's usually a bit more sciencey than the 5-4. Like I personally think a lot of science fiction authors, especially the hard sci-fi authors, are 5-6. They're sometimes misstated as 5-4, but I think 5-6 is a bit more.
Yeah, I think you said that about Asimov.
Yeah. Whereas the 5-4 has like Friedrich Nietzsche sort of stereotype, or Jean-Paul Sartre, or Stephen King as well. He's in Lovecraft for the horror type people. There's more dealing with themes of purpose and meaning and dread and nihilism if they're getting into writing, or dealing with like why are we here, what am I doing, and it's closer to the void than the 5-6 is. The 4 and the 5 are both at the bottom of the Enneagram for a reason, because symbolically they're both the closest to the void, and whereas the 6 is more like a street level sort of person.
Wait a minute, Jonathan. You just went very idealist then. What do you mean by the void?
Well, that's actually what Catherine teaches. Basically, if you go to the Enneagram symbol, you see the 9 is at the top, and then the 1 and the 8 are next to it, and then the 7 and the 2, the 3 and the 6, and then the 4 and the 5. So the very bottom of the Enneagram symbol is the 4 and the 5. So both those types, the way they view the world is more like a bottom-up sort of thing. It's like there's almost like they're very small and they're seeing the whole world as big and huge, and that's how they're seeing things. The 6 is also sort of there, but it's more the street level is more like the everyman sort of person. It's like there's they see themselves as small and looking up, but also kind of normal, shall we say. Whereas the 1 and the 8, they're both near the top. They're taking the big picture view of things on the mountain, looking down from Olympus sort of thing.
Wait a minute. Enneagram 8's looking at the big picture.
Yeah, in a way. In their own way. Like
well, it works if you're an ENTJ 8, like Catherine, and you can write about the 8 looking at the big picture, but I don't think ESTP 8s.
Even ESTPs would sort of do that. Like, a lot of presidents are ESTP 8s. A few presidents are ESTP 8s. Sort of it's like they're seeing the big picture, but they want to deal with it in a kind of blunt and direct way, like just solve the problem.
But Jonathan, though, the rationale there is okay. The 8 is looking at the big picture because they're near the top of the graphic.
Symbolically.
That might work for NFJs, but that kind of causality is not working for we NTs, is it, Hailey? Just because it's at the top of the picture.
Well, bear in mind you're both head types. You're the bottom picture. You can't see the big picture.
Yeah. But I can I can say that if someone is fixated on control, then and they're controlling the world, then yes, there is going to be. They're going to try and control the whole of their particular world. And so, I can see how they are big picture from that point of view of the big picture of control of all the power relationships around them, that particular kind of big picture. whereas other types might look at other kinds of big picture. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it's not big picture on every level. Each big picture is on a particular level. So, for example, you might have an INTP that looks at a big picture on one level, and then you have an INFJ that looks at the big picture on a completely different level. But I would say with the 8, that they're looking at the big picture in terms of power relationships and dynamics around them. Because I love that. I love this quote from NLP from Chris Howard: your focus determines your reality. And so the reality of the 8 is going to be looking at power dynamics around them and the big picture of that. Maybe how somebody else's power. It's like somebody, maybe Stalin, or an extreme example of sort of looking at if someone starts to get a bit more power, they could be a threat. I remember there was a British Labour politician who was very popular, Mo Mowlam, when she was the Minister for Northern Ireland, and she was getting more and more popular, and some people thought that she was reshuffled out of that position because she thought that if she got more popular, she would be a threat to Tony Blair. So that kind of an example of like being aware of power dynamics and getting people. So that kind of big picture,
well,
I understand if that's your focus of attention.
That would imply that Tony Blair's an 8, and he wasn't.
No, I know that, but that's the kind of things. But just the role makes you think about those things.
Okay, I think we're getting a little bit off topic. I could I can see what.
You see what I mean, though? But there's different kinds of big picture. It depends what you're looking at. Like you could say an ESFJ looks at the big picture of, and the FE big picture. It might just be something that's related to the dominant function and the dominant Enneagram.
Well, I could defend this. I could defend what this means in a different time and a different place, because I think.
Okay, I will decline.
Get there. Anyway, Hailey, do you have any thoughts based on what you're reading and so on?
Yes. So I relate to some of it, and some of it I don't. Like this line, they use fantasy and style to bolster their individuality and begin to dream of someone who will rescue them. See, when I daydream of being the rescuer, right? Like I don't like that doesn't relate. I don't relate to that at all.
I'll just say that might be like given who has the 4 fixation, like your INFJ and your INFP, someone who will rescue them, like, because it goes with in terms of what their jewels are good at, like in sort of like complementary in a relationship with INFP and the STJ and INFJ and the STP, but something like that. Whereas an NT with a strong 4 fix, they're not going to have it like that at all, because the NT, especially INTJ, which is like the most autonomous of the NTs, INTJ.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very independent. I would not like this whole dreaming of someone to rescue me. It's almost an insult a little bit. If someone were to say that to me.
Again, this is more of the core 4 rather than.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And they tend to be INFs.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's also, this book's quite old. In what way do you imagine rescuing others?
Well, I think some of it is sometimes, most of the time in my dream, I'm not singling out a particular person. It's more of I'm defending a group of people, or yeah, I mean, getting into my daydreams is kind of private to me, but it's in a sense of I want to uplift people to help do things on their own, like people who are too weak or incapable. And I struggle with this back and forth because I have issues with seeing people as incompetent and lazy. But then on the flip side, when someone is weak, or at least I perceive them to be weak, I really want to give them that fire to help them be able to uplift themselves and do something for themselves. Like I really find that's a huge part of who I am. And so I'm constantly oscillating between like, oh, you lazy effer, like you deserve the bullshit you're in. And like, oh, this weak person needs my help.
I have something relevant. Well, one moment, John. I actually have something actually relevant here. This is actually relevant. So this is something Amanda told me, and she did mention it in the event, and I think you were there as well, Hailey, when we did the strategic intellect of the rationals, and you were in the event with Amanda.
Okay.
And she might have brought up that her foster mother at the time, I mean, she's now out of the foster care system, but her foster mother at the time was like 78 years old, and she had this long sort of like career as a foster mother. And like I saw a bit of her on webcam, and so I believe Amanda when she says she's INTJ, and she was saying how the method that her foster mother took was very much like tough love kind of stuff. And I imagine that it would be that kind of like knowing, like getting that fine line between like, okay, the person needs help here, but it's like they're not gonna go overkill. It's like, okay, you need help now, you can do the rest yourself. And it's like necessary help.
Right. Yes. And this is the whole taking me away from the E3, because that's bad for business, right? That's bad for business. When you're making everybody capable, then no one's going to need your services anymore. But I don't care. I want people to be competent. There was something else I was going to say.
Yes, we get a lot of that in therapy, where the therapist like sort of wants the returning customer.
Yeah, right. That's not me. Nope, never. Sorry, I just cannot do it. The tough love thing, definitely. Except like, okay, I can be sweet and playful and like sensitive, but with a very few people in my life. With everyone else, when it comes to helping them, yeah, it's definitely tough love, like pushing them more with a stronger, like less of the sweet kind of, oh, you can do it, and more of like the just fucking do it. Like, yeah, it can come off kind of strong, I guess, sometimes. But yeah, okay. I'm going to read through. This is unhealthy. Yeah, I do relate to that. I fear that I'm wasting my life. I don't know if this is because I feel like I don't have enough time. I'm sorry. Should I be reading this at the bottom? I just had a little pop up on my screen with text from Jonathan.
Oh yeah. I was posting, not finished posting, so.
Oh, okay. Support their view of themselves. I don't relate to that. To save their self-image, they reject everyone and everything that doesn't support their view of themselves. Their repressed rage results in depression. I don't think I necessarily have repressed rage. I think when I get angry, like really angry, which is rare, but when I get there, it comes out. I cannot repress it. It just comes out, and I don't want to stop it. Force half becomes a dust.
Yeah, I'll just say for number 7, that bit that's highlighted in blue, I'll say that's not going to apply to an INTJ with a strong 4, because again, it's this kind of person is going to be typically INFJ, INFP, ISFP, and those are types that are like the 2 INs, the low energy anyway, and it's difficult for them to find a career that is satisfactory. It's usually either it's got to be with people, so it's like drawing on that diplomatic intellect, working with people like counselor, something that is meaningful with people and helping people on a psychological level, or it's something creative. So to that extent, so those kind of fours where it's like you might be like the ISFP, the artist, or or maybe things that want to be better, and part of what I think is holding them back is part of it is the fear that they're not quite good enough, and if they tried harder and failed, that would really mess up their self-image. That fear of failure, because that's like to do with their identity. Because then it's like that fear of, oh, I'm going to try really hard and get that product out, and then everyone laughs at it, not with it, or thinks it's rubbish, and it's like that's going to kill like the core identity of this. So that's that tension within, or maybe the four fixated person of they want to get on and get their products out there if they're creative, but if they fail, but what I was saying is that's not so much there. That wasting their life thing, again, it's specific to a core four. So it's like trying to. So Jonathan, maybe you could go through this. Well, I mean, in the other ones where it's like
the fear of failure is more the 3 than the 4, and what you just, and the product is more the.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But within
with the 4 is competitive because there's always so much love to go around, and I need to be special and unique in order to get that.
Yeah.
Love and affection. So they're trying to portray themselves in that way.
Yeah. I was sort of thinking about the 4 that's creative, but I take your point. But it's like
all 4s will have a creative streak in them.
Yeah. Or it's style and like hipster kind of stuff.
I think
there's a bit there, like with a particular, like when Catherine went over how they dress, and there's a little bit of
vintage stuff and what they like.
Yeah, it's like, so for example,
I was going to say if we're assuming that Hailey has 4 in her heart center.
I'm assuming that. Yes,
probably better not to look more at the 6 rather than the 4, because if we're looking at the wings, she'd relate to the 4 anyway.
Yeah. So, right then, cut to the chase.
So here are the stuff I post.
Right, I've got to make sure I've got the right one here. So this is type 5, and so is there any point showing anything in the type 5?
No.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, Hailey, I posted stuff in the private chat. I was wondering what you thought of it. It's from Tom Condon.
The
subtypes.
Should I read that first in the private chat?
I'll just say Tom Condon is a 6 himself and is into NLP, and I think is a concrete type. I think his Jungian type is either ISTP or ISFP. So he's a little bit more.
Basically, this is the self-preservation stuff that we wrote about.
Anyway, so Jonathan, where did you get this Tom Condon information from?
I got it from the internet.
Okay.
I'm a little fuzzy on how much copyright issue is. So
okay. What I really want from here is an NLP book, but it's not. It's out of print. I can't. That's no longer available.
Yeah. So you'll just tell me if there's anything you agree with or don't agree with in yourself.
I don't know if since this is in the private chat, can I tell you, can I talk about it freely?
You can talk about it freely, yeah.
Okay, so the first paragraph, I don't relate to any of that. They can be warm and integrating. They have a graceful diplomatic sociability. I do not. They try to bring out the best in others. So I only do this if I feel like not everyone who needs help, I will help. Because I feel like most people are capable. They're just lazy mother effers. And so I have a problem with that. But I have to be at a point where I feel that they just cannot, because of either they're too weak or something has happened in their life, or I have to feel particularly moved by it. I don't know how else to explain that, but sometimes in my life, I just have this innate feeling.
I'll just say that in the complete Enneagram book, this self-preservation 6 reads like an ISFJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good communication skills, which I don't feel like I have. I feel I'm very awkward and dry. Can tell people hard truths in a skillful or funny way. No, if I tell you a hard truth, it's often awkward and coming out cold. And for those few people I do care about, I will try to prep them before something comes out that I think they probably will have a hard time chewing on. I'll be like, hey, I'm here, I care for you. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because, I'll try to mentally prep them.
I'll just say why. In critiquing that profile about the self-preservation 6, what I'll say is that there were a lot of guardians, so there were a lot of SFJs, and there were a lot of ISFJs, and there are going to be a lot of ISFJ 6s. And so out of all of the self-preservation 6s out there, a hell of a lot of them are going to be ISFJ 6s. And so that's going to make its way into the profile.
Well, that's interesting. I think my mom is actually an ISFJ.
Yeah, I think my mother's triple FE. I think she's like Enneagram 629, self-pres 6. What's yours, Jonathan? I think you've got a SFJ parent.
I do, yes, self-pres 6.
And that makes them extra ISFJ.
Well, maybe typical stereotype in some way.
Yeah.
So
all three of us have an SFJ 6 parent.
Well, I'm not sure.
Everyone's got an SFJ mother.
Yeah, I don't know what my mom's Enneagram type is, though.
But you think she's ISFJ?
Oh, yeah.
Right, so that's all three of us an ISFJ. Yeah. That gives you an idea of how many ISFJs there are.
I will say, I think this in particular self-pres 6 description is more the self-pres 6 with a 7 wing and the 5 wing, in my experience. Yeah. I was also wondering, Hailey...
with the funny in there. Yeah.
Well, how much have you read so far, Hailey? I wrote...
Oh, pardon me.
Said 3 paragraphs.
Okay. Sensitive to using power fairly. For the most part, yes, but kind of sometimes no, because I feel like I can be kind of an asshole in my mind.
That wasn't what you were going to say.
Pardon?
I thought you were going to say something else. I mean.
Okay. Can be tough in negotiations, but basically have a win-win attitude. I don't feel like I can have a win-win attitude unless I feel that, like, if the person is trying to screw me over or something negative about them, I won't have a win-win attitude. I'll have a very tough attitude.
And also try and think of this as kind of like the persona, or like a means to an end to your, like you would act like this in order to get your 5 needs met, perhaps. That's a way of thinking of it. Or if you would, maybe your husband would.
Okay. Yes. Okay. In that situation, then maybe, yes. Consider everyone an equal. That is very difficult for me because I oscillate.
That's INTJ. There's no shame in admitting that. Hey, that's like nearly all INTJs. There's not many INTJs that consider people equal.
Well, it's been a very humbling journey for me. Yeah. I'll just say that. It's just something that's there. I can't deny it, and I'm honest to a fault. So yes, I don't, but I do. But I don't. It's difficult.
People have different. This one of the good things about Kersey is he had a very good view of intelligence because, okay, so what he did was, because I found this out from his son. So the first PhD that David West Kersey did was on intelligence, and he was coming up with different intelligence tests. And what he realized, and this sort of then became blended with his temperament theory, where he developed a kind of intellect that each temperament was on average better at than the other ones. But you can have, for example, a guardian scientist or an artisan scientist or an idealist scientist. It's just on average. And so And what he did with his intellect system is that it was fairer to people. And also because Kersey was looking at actions, and he was literally an educational psychologist helping children in schools who were naughty, especially delinquent boys. And so basically got round to a point of view of it's like when you asked me about intelligence, Hailey, and Enneagram, and where he reframed it to, it's much better to reframe it to competence, because then a smart person can ask themselves, well, am I putting my, is the rubber meeting the road? Am I converting my intelligence into competence?
Mm-hmm.
So if someone out there thinks they're really smart, they should really ask themselves, what can I do? Because then it's like, well, if you can say, I can do this, I can do that, that's evidence. And then someone's not kidding themselves or getting overconfident. And it's better to look at competence, what someone can do, because then that's broader. It's a wider range of things that people can do. Whereas when people think about intelligence, they tend to think about 3 things that are testable, like logico-mathematical, visuospatial intelligence, which is like those intelligence tests where it's like shapes, and maybe one of the shapes is like viewed from the other side, and you have to look at which is the one which is from the other side, and all this kind of stuff. And then there's sort of like ones with linguistic intelligence, because those 3 are relatively easier to test. It's hard to test for interpersonal intelligence, hard to test for intrapersonal intelligence, and those sort of like that theory of the 7 kinds of intelligence. And then also the kinds of intelligence that you get with the various Kersey temperaments. But I'm going to try and go back to why I brought this up. But my point is learning that. And then also this saying I got from Dario's book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. I love this saying. Don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Don't judge Shakespeare by his ability to do maths.
Yeah,
because we don't know how good he was at maths. And that's why changing it from intelligence to competence. What is someone's socially useful, skilled action? Then it's again looking at actions, and it's actually a good lesson, particularly for INTPs, because that helps them to get into that mode of to get the TE going on. Okay, what can I actually do? What am I competent at? Rather than an INTP thinking to themselves, oh, I know a lot about philosophy. Yes, but what's your competence? What can you do? And I think that's good for all IN types that are not INTJ. It's like a TE way of doing it, and it's more verifiable. But a bit of a digression. But that's what I sort of mean about, because someone can like get trapped in their own particular kind of intelligence and judge everybody by that as if there's one kind of intelligence.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, my ability to navigate a room is terrible. But someone who's SE Dom would laugh at me. I mean, that's fair. So.
Well, this is also a social last. Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying this is also social last because you're social last.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I do relate to the whole last half of that. Their home environment is especially important. Could feel like a feathered nest sheltering the 6 from the world's dangers. But I just want to be here and comfortable. It's not because of the world's dangers. But yes, I mean, my home environment is important to me. Good at practical tasks and managing the material details of living. Often habit-bound, want the elements in the world to be known and predictable. Yes, I do. But for the sake of time, because if I know how to do something quick, then I can revert to what I really want to be doing. One less help is self-presence. No, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
The imagined hostility, like if someone's being hostile with me, I'll probably go silent and cold, and that's about it, unless they really peep me off. But I won't be warm so that they're not hostile to me. And I think if I ever tried to be warm, it would just make things worse because it would come off so fake because I just don't know how to do it. And they actively worry about their ability to materially survive. Yes.
Hmm.
No. Fantasies about material loss, no. If they sense aggression or disapproval, counterphobically zero in on it. No, I'd say my concern is about like physical stockpiles of things, not about people's disapproval or aggression. I feel that I'm way more competent and able to deal with any person's aggression than I am with potentially like not having enough supplies. Then they use humor, charm, self-deprecation to make friends. No, I do not absolutely like make friends out of but you said this is in terms of being stressed.
Well, yes, but also because we're looking at the wing, this would be more like the persona you present to the world, like a means to an end. How much of this would be a means to an end to you?
Yeah, you do that, and then I'll bring something in about prepping. That there's a sort of
And
a
also,
wider
again,
context.
I'm just wondering if we're thinking your husband's a 5-6, could he act like this at any point? Yeah, things you're saying no to.
I really don't know. I think maybe there's more of an ability for the last sentence in him, but only in stressful situations where it's like they have supplies we need, and if we don't try to use humor, charm, or to make friends out of them, like only in extreme situations. But I don't know.
Hailey, I think there's something that's important in terms of. So, for example, you said that you're. I don't know if you want to say it, but like you described what your first date was with your future husband and what you watched, and like it's in the same vein as Peter Schiff, where it's
Mike
looking
Maloney.
and where it's like it's not just a case of someone prepping because they've got that need to prepare. There's also the fact that intellectually, we three, me, you, and your husband, know that there are bad economic things very close to happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that thing that intellectually we know sort of like the fundamentals and stuff's going to happen. And that is getting bearing into the mind in terms of the prepping, that there is this sort of like context to it. And so he listens to Mike Maloney, I think it is. And do you listen to it with him? And what are the kinds of things that he says?
Well,
okay,
yeah.
What are you? In other words, what are you prepping for? Because I know what Peter Schiff says, but I don't listen to the person that you and your husband listen to.
Yeah, so I mean the crashing of the dollar, everything turning to shit, CBDCs being implemented, your assets being frozen because you're not being a good little stewardess of the state, things like that make gold and silver quite a commodity to have at that point.
This is the things you get into, Jonathan, when you become a libertarian. Like, you have these thoughts.
And I wouldn't even consider myself a libertarian. What I consider myself to be starts with an A. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Okay. More nervously dependent than the other 6. Nervously dependent. Yeah, okay, but this is in terms of stress. But I've never seen myself actually. I don't know. Less in touch with their own hostility, since that is the opposite of the weak, warm person they present themselves to be. victimizing victim, can take a one down position in relationships.
You see, one of the things I would say about Tom Condon is when we interviewed him, he's not familiar with Jungian types. So you're sort of operating with one arm tied behind your back when you're sort of like categorizing people. And you know what I mean? It's like he's not going to be able to filter out different, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like what's coming from Enneagram, what's coming from Jungian type. If you don't know about Jungian type, then yeah, and you're operating with one arm tied behind your back. It's like, how do you know what's coming from what?
Yeah, and I feel like most of what I relate to in these with the 6 is the resources, and I'm like, well, is that self-pres or is that the 6?
That's more self-pres.
Yeah.
So I would say that. So I'd say, Hailey, that like in both Victor Galenka and David Kersey, they've written the INTJ as, so Victor Galenka did the type as NI minus, and he defines NI minus by how INTJ, ILI, intuitive logical introvert, uses NI, and he calls it like, it's like, it's negativist, and it's about, it's a conservative kind of NI. Yes, that's it. Reducing, minimizing the negative with NI minus, minimizing the negative rather than emphasizing the positive. So it's like trying that focus of attention on eliminating risk. And that's what Galenka got to, independently of Kersey. And Kersey described the INTJ as predisposed to, and in Personology, his final work. So it's predisposed to the arranger of contingencies. And he wrote about that in Please Understand Me Too as well, a book that came out in 98, where the INTJ is very good at working out at what can go wrong, contingency planning. And he gave the example of the INTJ planning the liberation of Europe, where it's like, if we do this and A goes wrong, then we do B. If B goes wrong, then we do C. Thinking about and being preoccupied with how things can go wrong. So both Galenka and Kersey got to the same viewpoint of the INTJ, that they have a focus, this intuition of time, intuition of development, but with a negative spin on how things can go wrong and what to do when they go wrong. And so that's coming from your Jungian type.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I naturally do that. It's coming, it just happens. I mean, with little things during the day, I'm thinking of when should I do this first and then that next. Oh, but no, I should do that first because I'm going here, and it only meant, like, it just happens. But it's just more of a, I don't want to spend more time doing things I don't want to be doing. Just for me. So, okay, I'm going to read through this. The healthy liberated 6s. Well, if I am a 5-wing 6, I wouldn't describe myself as a liberated because I have not yet let go of the belief that I must rely on someone. Excuse me, let go of the belief. Yeah, I have not, because I want to do things like myself. I find pride in it. Like I want to be independent because I just consider that, I don't know, just part of who I am. Achieve their basic desire to find security and support. No. Should I skip the healthy if we're going to be looking at myself in terms of stress, being stressed?
Oh, so are we looking at this now? Oh, I thought, okay.
No, go ahead, Ben.
Are you looking at the ones in the side in the private chat, or the?
No, on the screen.
On the main screen. Okay. Which one do you want me to put? Do you want to start with?
No. Go
average. Let's go to the average.
Go to the
average first. Okay.
Begin to fear they will lose their independence, believe they need more support. So yes, I fear that I will lose my independence. I don't want to ever not be capable, but also believe they need more support. No, they invest themselves in the people and organizations.
I'll just say that Kersey would have said that, like, autonomy. Kersey wrote about autonomy being important to NTs, and I got the impression that that's more the case for NTJs than NTPs, because, you know, from a socionics point of view, NTPs more appreciate help with SI kind of stuff, whereas NTJs, if they were offered help in the SI area, they'd see it as an insult.
Yes, I do
Yeah.
see it as an insult.
Yeah. And part of that autonomy is, first of all, for all NTs, it's autonomy in thinking for themselves. And then part of that is like autonomy in other ways. And with the 5, and so it's like, this is sort of like bringing out other reasons why INTJ is super autonomous.
Well, you do get type 6 INTJs, mind. That's no.
Good point.
Yeah, so think about this. In this sense, the 5-wing-6 is more, as I said, they're more paranoid. They're more worried about external dangers and looking for external security. So even though all 5s will want their independence and all 5s will be of that owner quality and stuff, the 5-wing-6 will be a bit quicker to look to others for support than the 5-wing-4. And it'd be like more comfortable being the group expert, whereas the 5-wing-4 is a bit more elitist and more exclusive because of the 4.
I remember when I was doing, and this relates to, when I was like, I'm still characterizing the character of Laura Bonneau, and I came up with like multiple reasons for independence and what are sort of like lies behind that. So Hailey, could you give me all the reasons that you have for why you value independence?
I'm not sure on the spot I could give you all the reasons, but just some that come to mind. I take a lot of pride in it. I think part of it's ego. I think a lot of it's pride, but on the flip side, it's insulting to think that I couldn't do that myself. But there's something you said, I think it was last week, that there are some values we have that you just don't know where they come from. I don't know where that comes from. It just is. It just is there. I have this just insatiable yearn to do everything myself. I want to do it myself. It makes me feel capable and competent. And one of the times in my life where it was genuinely, I would not want to end. And this is probably bad for me, because if something ever were to happen to me again, I don't want to go back to the hospital. But when I severed my tendon in the garden and I had to be overnight after having my reattachment for my finger, that was fun. I couldn't do anything. And oh my gosh, I mean, it's terrifying. It's really terrifying. And I think some of that is that I've always struggled with being physical. Like, I know that sounds so stupid, but I struggle with the fact that I have a body and that I have to eat and I have to take care of it, and that it limits me sometimes. And I want to be able to do everything myself, so that part of it's ego, part of it is I just don't want to have to burden anyone else. Like, I cannot imagine having someone have to be here taking care of me all the time. Like, oh my gosh, it would just not be good. It would really, really wear me down mentally. So yeah, part of it's ego. Part of it is I don't want to burden anyone. Part of it is that I struggle with being physical, and I feel like if I can't meet my physical needs, I don't want anyone else to have to do it. Like, I want to do it. Yeah, I guess I'd have to think more about why, or if you gave me reasons for your character, I'll tell you if I relate to them or not.
Okay. So for Laura, who's ENFP, yes, there's that aspect of pride in being independent, but then there's also the fact of the freedom and the options that come with it.
Yes, there is a part of that, but it's more of an FU freedom. Like, because I'm not tied down, And I think part of this also is why I like to be so minimalistic, because the less I need, the less I'll need to rely on other people. And the more, if someone wants me to bend a certain way, like, oh, but you need to do this because you need this paycheck. It's like, yeah, go F yourself. Like, I don't need that. Like, so there's a power in that I really like that gives me freedom to hold to my values and do what I want to do, because I'm not confined to making a certain amount or to,
And then there's also independence from a sort of like a self-pres point of view.
Can you elaborate?
Like especially like a financial independence of this is for Laura. It's like, and then part of her is, because she's a feminist character, being independent because she sees that as a feminist value. Because she's got like,
I wouldn't consider myself, because I've never thought, oh, I can do this because I've got a vagina. Like, I'm sorry, but I just think it's so stupid. Like, I've never find myself thinking, oh, I can or can't do something because I'm a woman. I just want to be treated like a person.
I know that's what NTs are like. It's like brains in carriages, especially the INTs.
Yeah, like I want people to see my intellect and to see me as not what my shell is. Like at this, like it's weird, because I understand how people are very much, and they shouldn't be, but just many people are, judge you by, what you are, what you look like. And so I realize that too, but I do. And I think that's many reasons why I don't have many friends. I don't talk to many people. I just don't have time. I don't want many friends, but also there aren't many people who I find see me for me or want to. But
even people in the typology community who are supposed to have competence in this area can get you completely wrong just based on visual typo.
That really pissed me off and it was my own fault for going to Reddit. But yeah, they type Hailey Harber in Google and pull up my profile and E3, and I'm like, hey, you want to listen to me? No, E3, motherfuck. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry to cuss. These people are supposed to be competent.
Yeah, and on Facebook, oh, she's ESFP, and it's like, well, if you know about typology, you would know that NI-DOM women, there's a way that suggestible SE tends to manifest. It's like they've got a little bit of like, it manifests in a certain way.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to continue reading on here. Where they can't meet the conflicting demands of their different commitments. They try to resist having any more pressure put on them without alienating their supporters. They're anxious, pessimistic, and suspicious. So I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic. I'd actually say I'm a realist hinging on optimism, but I just naturally see how things can go wrong. But I don't sit around in a negative mindset. Like, I feel like when I'm thinking about the chain of progression, like how things are going to happen and where this can go wrong, it's not that I'm, oh gosh, this is going to go wrong or that could go wrong. I'm just like seeing it without emotion. Like, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen.
Oh, and is it literally like that? Because like, you're visualizing it, and is there not even like a commentary on it? It's just all purely visual.
A lot of time it's visual. Yeah, purely visual. Right.
Whereas with me, it's like an internal commentary.
Well, unless I'm thinking about talking to someone.
Yeah.
Then that's different, or like a conversation I had with someone and I'm reflecting back on that. But yeah, more and more as I get older, there is more commentary. When I was younger, it was so full of imagery. But yeah, often when I'm thinking about things going wrong, it's very much imagery because I'm seeing it play out. I'm seeing the picture play out in my mind.
So that was a Galenko idea, that the NI and SI DOMs were like primarily visual. So Jonathan, was it like that for you?
Yeah, I see more visually in my mind just see how things go.
And there's not much that. Is there a verbal commentary?
Not really.
That's for me. Might
it
be.
very detailed for you, Jonathan, what you see in your mind? Because for me, it's not.
Yeah, it's a whole bit fuzzy. I don't dwell on the details too much. Just like, yeah, hard to explain.
It's like a blurry, vivid picture, right? It's
Yeah, what if it's yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, as I'm reading this profile, I'm remembering that this has been criticized as being a bit more about the social six than the six in general. But the real thrust of this is that the six thinks the world is an unsafe place and they're not sure they can deal with it by themselves, so they're looking for allies and supporters or some kind of network to help them, even if they want independence. And I'm also going to say, yeah, you get 20 minutes anyway, so
right.
Want to
So,
get.
Jonathan, when are we going to get the big book of Enneagram out of you, where it's all like the big book of Enneagram, where it's per Jungian type and lots very specific?
Yeah, maybe one day. Yeah. Anyway, overall,
Jonathan, you said something earlier that I really related to, and I know that's not the be all end all between the 4 and the 6, but you said the 5-wing-4 is more independent. Like when things go wrong, they still, even then, they won't turn to people for help, but the 5-wing-6 will, like more on average. And if that were the deciding bit, I would be 5-wing-4. Like I really have trouble asking for help.
yeah.
I just can't, like, even when it's extreme. Like I once considered living in my car because I didn't know if I could make rent at the end of the month. And I'm like, I'm not asking anyone for help. I'm not calling my parents and be like, oh, can you give me money? Like, no, I just can't do it.
Yeah, the 5-wing-6 doesn't like asking for help either, but they are quicker to do it than the 5-wing-4. It's tricky if we're saying that you've got 4 in your heart center because you're relating to the 5-wing-4 anyway. That's the real tricky thing here. I think overall I would still say 5-wing-4 for you over 5-wing-6. If you relate to 5-wing-6 at all, it's more because, well, you'd expect that anyway because you're core 5. So probably a 5-wing-4 is what I'm leaning towards so far.
Yeah, and also Hailey's not got, like, part of me is looking for an authority, and I get annoyed when they're not right. Whereas for Hailey, she's not looking for an authority. Not really. You just want the. And also, I would say,
here's the thing: the reason why I'm going to the authority is because they're the only ones who have the information. If I could get it myself, I would get it myself.
No.
But like Brad Schoenfeld, yes, there are more researchers, but he's one of the most well known. So I know I can go there and find the information from his studies, information like that, and it's not like I value his thoughts, but I disagree with him in many ways. But again, it's not just because he's the authority. Like if I could get that information from the research assistant, I would go.
Yeah. I'm similar with Dario Nardi. Like I like his function definitions, but I think that his TI definition leans way too much towards how NTPs use TI. All this gaining leverage using a framework, like applying. First of all, it's a very TE way of describing TI, that you're using TI in order to gain leverage, like you're applying a theory as leverage, whereas a lot of NTPs are just interested in theories because they're interested in theories and not thinking about gaining leverage with it. And also, like, that's biased towards NTPs because, like, so we did it last week, Jonathan, with someone where we went through the TI, and I could see someone who's equally strong in TI as an STP, not tick as many of those boxes because they're not as theoretical. So that I disagree. So there's only a few points, but a lot of so I'm like that now, where I got to a point where I will disagree with people, even like people I really respect.
Why?
Well, because it's reason. Reason comes first. With like, if it doesn't make sense and it contradicts reality, and it's like I'm going towards the evidence. It's like you, Hailey, with Schoenfeld. You go towards the evidence.
Right.
It's like if I'm so for Dario Nardi talking about TI or all these and it's all about theories, and I'm like, now am I supposed to block out reality that STPs are concrete, they're not abstract. There's these boxes that you have for TI have an abstract bias in them. Like, I'm not going to block that out. I have to be even-handed with that. And plus, part of me all the while is being skeptical-ish of functions. And I believe much more in temperament. Whereas with functions are a useful model, and the way they play out, there's a lot of evidence for them. But that's why I bang on about Kersey a lot.
I have a question, Ben, for you. I mean, you're going towards the evidence, not towards what the authority is telling you should believe. Would that not be more of a 5 fix than a 6 fix?
This is the problem. It's the relation. I mean, the way it was written in this book by Beatrice Chestnut about the 6. It's the relation to authority, and I think Jonathan put it is that the 6 fixated person wants an authority. They want to follow someone who really is really good. They want the authority, and they feel annoyed when somebody isn't that authority.
Somewhat. I'd also say the 6 would treat evidence as an authority itself, subconsciously. Not like the evidence is more like, okay, the evidence says this, so that's what you should be following. Rather than
also for rationals, we trust reason, and guardians trust authority.
Yeah, it's like authority in a broader sense than just a person or a system. It's like I've definitely seen 6s argue like they're not listening and not even agreeing with someone because it contradicts evidence, and they're not over. That's probably particular types of 6s, but whereas the 5 evidence is data for their theories and their independence.
Maybe it might be like this. Maybe
it's an attitude to evidence. That's more.
Maybe this might be a difference between a 5 and a 6. Maybe a 5 might be pissed off if they found someone who was great on everything, whereas the 6 would be quite happy that they found someone that they could believe in that was like on every point.
Well, the 6 would want to test that person, like to see if they can trust them, ask them questions, and that sort of thing.
It's like I'm a little bit annoyed that McKee is not great on everything. Like when he gets away from actual plots, like when he starts talking about characterization and humor, like it's a little bit simplistic. But on actual story, he's rock solid.
I would say the 5 would be more envious of a person who's great at everything, and the 5 would like, I wish I was that awesome at everything and I can do all that and be taught self-sufficient and so on. Like chasing omniscience.
I'm also, but you see, this is the contradictions, and probably one of the reasons why the 6 is so contradictory, which might also be because there's so many Jungian types that have that fixation, which is why the people who write the profiles of the 6 will say, "Oh, it seems this is a very contradictory type." That might be because they're averaging lots of different Jungian types, but I also think there are contradictions within the 6 where they want the authority, but they don't trust the authority, and they're questioning it, and they're questioning themselves, and there's self-doubt. But with me, where you've got, first of all, you've got the INTP that trusts reason, and then you got the 6 that where I'm a little bit more, I want evidence than maybe other INTPs, and like the stuff in socionics where I'm like, this is ridiculous. Immanuel Kant would not approve of this. It's like critique of pure reason, and it's like what the way they teach. And it might be why I've got into things like when I was younger, when I got into stuff like postmodernism with that doubt there. But I also think from my experience of talking to other INTPs in typology, they're more naturally there about the limits of reason and that lot. It tends to be other types. And I tend to think that socionics can exploit people who have TI, sort of like non-INTP kind of TI, and they just take it.
I think
don't think for themselves. So it's weird. Is that I want an authority, but I also question the authority, and I also want people to think for themselves.
Yeah. I think the evidence thing is more like a maturity level, as well as like if you understand, if you're like with me, as mentioned the last time we talked, I didn't like being forced to give evidence for things I thought were really obvious, but I learned to do it anyway because I had to, for either for essays or just for arguments on the internet or anything like that. And I learned to that other INFJs are not as quick to do that. I think other INFJs have slightly stronger intuition as a result.
Yeah, because of your I was going to say your history in history. You're used to going towards evidence.
Yeah, whether I like it or not. But so, yeah, sort of like everyone can learn to go towards evidence. Some are more natural than others. It's about learning, accepting the limits of other functions and all that. But anyway, I think we're getting off topic now. As far as based on everything Hailey's been saying and what we've been reading and all that, I think I'm doing 5.4. So self-pres sexual 5.4 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, because I remember when you were like doing the 5 versus the 6, because I know you were being thorough, and it's like, but yeah, I always thought the Thor was strong, because I always thought with Hailey like authentic to a fault, and very strong FI, very little FE.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, but it's that. It's true though.
Fine, it's true. It just makes me laugh.
Yeah, that's another way you could look at it as well. You can see the 5.6 is slightly better FE than the 5.4 in terms of being able to analyze other people's emotions a bit better, because the 4's more about their own feelings, whereas the 6 is sort of ambivalent. The 6 has their own feelings and other people's feelings, and they're trying to manage between.
Yeah, because for me with Hailey, it's like with the 3 versus the 4, it was all of those sort of like opportunities, Hailey, where you're sort of like you put your principles first, or like not taking the endorsements for fitness modeling, because you did. So Jonathan, she didn't want to endorse powders because Hailey doesn't believe in the powders, the protein powders. Also things where.
Well, that might indicate the gut type is stronger than the heart type as well. But yeah, I don't like if she did have 3 in there, I'd say the 8 was over the 3 rather than that.
And then also about the body paint art, that it's about artistic expression.
Yeah. That's more 4.
Yeah, and then there's not much and there's not much money in that area, whereas. And especially with the way YouTube is,
right?
And it's difficult to do that without getting clamped down on
right. Videos demonetized for wearing a tight shirt.
Yeah. Whereas
so you can imagine
whereas a 3, would go, oh, they'd be more focused on the success and changing that. Whereas you're about the artistic expression, and the success is secondary. I mean, yes, you've got the strong self-pres there, but the main thing is the artistic expression.
Yeah, I've always had a huge artistic bent. Always.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, your cartoon work was good, Hailey, when you had those little animations. I love that. Jonathan, she did these little drawings of herself. She did a cartoon version of herself. It was good.
Yeah.
She did all with a whiteboard, all animated. It was.
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
You should also probably change the title of this video because
Right.
3 or 4, but it's really 5.4 versus 5.6.
Yeah, will do. Yeah, I read through the unhealthy, all this. I
Right.
don't relate to any of it.
The one thing is, I don't know how useful. There's this thing I bring up that it used to be a joke. I used to say, Jonathan, hey, what do you think of this? And it's like, oh no, it's Ben. You keep on asking me every time, what do you think? But that thing from there was that graphic that had it was like, what was it, infographics, Nick Helbig graphics, and then she did like the 6 and the 4, and I try to find like the sharpest version of these I could, but if you put that up, I think she pretty much got these from. This is all like the Naranjo version.
Okay.
Now, I myself would say I don't relate to this that much. What I related to were the traits of the 6 in this book.
Okay. Fear,
Although-
anger. Oh, yes?
There's things like, so for instance here, intellectually devoted to reason. Now, my mother's not like that, and she's like ISFJ6. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how that is true. I mean, would you put that in there, Jonathan, for the 6?
Depends on what they mean by it.
I think this is from Naranjo because like there's pictures of Nick Helbig with Naranjo.
It says Shad.
Yeah, I don't relate to a lot of this. Retreat, fear of anger, rage, fear, anxiety, feeling like a weakling, over alert. Yes, I want everything to be under control, but just because I want everything to be under my control, because I want to get shit done.
Also get the lines and see that some are saying this is the conflict of the 6, and this is the virtue of the 6, and this is the.
It must be so hard to write a 6 description if you don't know about Jungian type. Because you've got all these different Jungian types with the 6 description. To try and find the common traits and to disentangle them from Jungian type, it's going to be impossible if you don't know about Jungian type.
Yeah.
When you're ready, I can show you the 5.
Yeah, I just had a question. What does that mean? Like passion, the green.
Oh, each of the Enneagram types have their own passion, and they've got their own traps and their own avoidance and so on. So the passion of the 6 is like what they're most focused on. So in this case, doubt, paranoia, suspicion, cowardice, you'd say, are hypervigilance, skepticism, there's irresoluteness, vacillation, so on. So
Okay, yeah.
the passion of the 5 would be different from the passion of the 6. It's better to show the 6 Ben because Hailey said she doesn't have long.
Okay.
And you go
yeah.
show the 5, I mean.
Okay. So
conflict, nothing to do with me. Yeah, that's pretty accurate, unless I get really angry.
yeah, this one seems pretty good.
Yeah, much more than the 6.
Is that true, Jonathan? Hypersensitivity?
Where are you seeing that?
There in light green.
Oh, yeah.
What is the light green?
The one where the
Yeah, I
cursors-
know, but what does the color
I think
mean?
it's conflict.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I think they are
It's
meant
not
to.
color coded super well. It's just broadly to get them together, to separate them
Okay.
out.
And
Yeah,
so
they're hypersensitive. Yeah, they seem very cold and stoic on the outside, but internally there is this sensitivity, and that's why they're presenting as cold and stoic and stuff, and why they're cutting off their emotions because they're so sensitive to them.
Right. Okay.
Like, it's the fear of being overwhelmed by emotions. They're hypersensitive to emotions and feelings and stuff, so they cut them off.
Right.
yeah, I feel that I can feel things very deeply, but as much as I want to say I am not bothered by my own emotions, I guess I will kind of go out of my way to not deal with them sometimes or put it off. Avoid emptiness, a sense of not having enough. Yes, okay. Defense mechanism, isolation, withdrawal, craves privacy. Likes to work autonomously. But I mean, how much of this is NT and how much of this is E5?
It's more E5. Like, if you got
That's the thing.
Ben,
Because-
what do you relate to and not relate to?
Oh, dear me. Well, I think like postponement of action. That's going to be more for INTPs are going to have a lot of problems with that postponement of action, because even Kersey wrote about. That's why Marilyn Bates got the credit on the book for the original Please Understand Me, because she was like INTJ and she was like, and she died, and she was like forced, and she was like pressured Kersey, you got to turn this course into a book. And so, and the phrase used by get off his duff to get the book done. And so INTP is, so and INTP, a lot of very high percentage of INTPs are 5 fixated, or core 5s. And so postponement of action is going to be very relevant for INTPs.
Because I personally feel decisive.
Pathological detachment, I would object to, but they are, but viewed from the outside, people would say, in fact, viewed from the outside, most psychologists who like are interested in like interpersonal differences will probably say that nearly all IT types, IXTX types, would be pathologically detached, because of that weak FE, because that the introverting and thinking preference, they look detached, because like INTJ and ISTJ are FE vulnerable, and INTP and ISTP are FE inferior. And so it's that quote from Avon: I've never understood why it should be necessary to become irrational in order to prove that you care, nor indeed why it should be necessary to prove it at all. And these INTs like trust in reason, and they don't want to get emotion, they want to stay in reason. And so again, it looks like they're detached, they're not involved.
Okay, Ben, the question was not about INTPs or INTs, it was for ITs, it was about you.
Okay, about me. Okay, so what I relate to in this, okay.
Or not relate to.
Really?
Rationalize.
Although as a 6, I'd expect it to relate to some anyway. I think
I
even
can
the
just
fact,
list them off.
I think even the fact that Ben's taking time to think about it just demonstrates what the
Yeah.
it is.
That's crazy. That's really helping me understand more about you, Ben. I don't know why I had.
What?
Maybe it's our
What?
NTness
What
that
is
we share, but
what the fact that I have to think about this?
yeah. I mean, for me, I just man, I can list them off.
Okay. What else do I hear about feelings? Because I think you should. If you see that video, how I use FI. It's not written like that. It's not how it's something like how Ben baseline experiences FI, and I bring up my tri-type, the 6, the 4, and the 1, and I think that I prefer to be in a state where feeling is not involved, unless I'm feeling happy. These other kind of feelings, it's like, so in other words, when I would say I'm in what I would consider to be an FI state, I'm usually unhappy with that. I'm usually not enjoying being in an FI state. I like being in a calm, happy, sort of any kind of state. Now, and if I'm writing a character, but there's a part of me that likes to write a character in a tough situation with like a dilemma, because I think, oh, that would be interesting with all the inner conflict and that. And so I'll go to that place to write that. So for instance, in the stage play, when I wrote Wilma, thinking she's like going to get like dark, but I don't like spending time in that state. I don't like being in an FI. It's just like that preference. Because when I'm in an FI state, it's like when I'm going to those fixations, the 6, the 4, and the 1. Whereas, you see what I mean? It's like the anxiety or the feeling, if I'm like in a 1 state of feeling something is right or that it's not wrong. Say it's something with politics. I'm not happy when I'm in that state. I'm not happy that I'm angry about something, or you know what I mean. It's like it tends to be negative. The feeling part. It's
a lot of my FI I think is also negative, but I like it drives me. I enjoy it. Like it's that brooding side of me that I can just sit in my mind and just
you value
build and
FI.
build and build.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's the valued versus unvalued. Whereas the INTP likes to, and myself, we like to stick in those alpha functions where it's like TI, NE, and FE, where it's like a happy atmosphere around us and like sort of NEing around and getting positive feedback and a good feeling, not being in a state of like moral dilemmas or ethics or whereas like NS will like to stay in there and talk in that stuff. Whereas I think it's that preference for wanting to be, again, it's like rationals like to be rational, I suppose. But so again, that's the whole theme of that when I did that video, how I experience FI, and it tends to be negative. Okay, what about for you, Jonathan? When do you experience FI? Are you happy when you're in FI state or unhappy?
Well, in FI state, I feel kind of selfish. That's like I don't mind being in FI if it's like I'm being private and alone and into my feelings. But if I get too wrapped up in them, it's like I'm. I don't always see it as the most important thing, shall we say?
Yeah, so it's like my FI is coloured by 6, 4, and 1, and like you've got anxiety with the 6, and the 4 is thinking about. Yeah, so.
Anyway, I think I'll need to go in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, same. We should probably wrap it up. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to, but I could just list off what I relate to with this slide.
Go on.
So.
I'll be quiet.
Oh, you want me to? First is the top. I love that. Treat as a challenge, not as emotion with conflict. Nothing to do with me. Leave the scene. Hide, contain anger. Unless I'm really angry, but that's rare. Negativism, yes and kind of no. We talked about that earlier. It just happens naturally. Repression of feelings, unhooks from emotion. Dwelling in abstractions, avoid concreteness. Clings to knowledge to feel safe. Reading to replace living. I live on Quora. Apathy, autonomy, guilt proneness. Hold on, let me see what this is. Is that talking style? Because
Whereas to me, reading is a challenge. Reading is a chore. But
yeah,
that might be an ADHD thing, and because I have to hyperfocus.
Okay. So this sense of inferiority, I don't relate to that. I don't know what the orange is supposed to be.
The orange is it's either talking style or the virtue.
Yeah, I think it's talking style.
Okay, so guilt proneness.
Oh, you see that as orange? I see that as yellow.
Oh, pardon me. Yes, yellow. It's like a dark yellow.
Guilt proneness. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's meant to represent.
Yeah, the colours are just. I've looked through all the ones. It's not totally consistent. It's just to group them. There's no magical color code going on. There's usual. I mean, like usually the passions are in this color, but if you go through the ones, they do vary. Like here, the passion's all gone green. Then it's red. Then it's blue.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just a way of grouping them.
It could be then mixing up then 5 with some other type.
I mean, maybe this is useful. I mean,
yeah, I'm an extremely confident person, like notoriously.
Oh, that's 4. It's more like sharing confidence with someone else, like taking someone for confidence. For us, that means.
Okay. Romantic, yes, I can be. Passionate about idealized partner, yes, very. Fantasizes about perfect relationship, yes, I used to. Search for that absolute love, yes. I'm just gonna skip the social. I'm not gonna read it.
What I imagined there, Hailey, is if your husband was walking by and he heard that, and you said passionate about idealized person, I imagine a quick INTJ smile on his face, and then poof, it's gone.
Most likely so. Most likely so. That's how a lot of our exchanges happen during the day. They're just on and off. So, yeah, wall people out. Problem with expression. I feel that I can have a problem with expression. Even when I feel like I sound so intense, I'm just emotionally dry. Like when I watch my own videos back and I'm like, man, in that moment I was feeling so like strong and intense, and I'm just watching myself like, dude, you're so dry.
That's a Steffi POTUS. That's a Steffi POTUS, the reduced affect display.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. Okay, well, I've got to go, Jonathan. I know you have to go. Thank you guys so much. That was very enlightening. I appreciate your time, and yeah, maybe next time we can get to the 3 versus 4.
Oh, I think we know that. Hey, we did that. Like,
but...
nailed down. The 4 is nailed down. The 4 is nailed down.
To record it, but that's okay.
That's fine.
I can record it on my own. I'm happy to
upload another video to my channel.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I was going to say I can just do it myself, but that's fine.
Okay. Yep, that'd be good.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much. I'm going to end the broadcast.
Although